warm welcome to everyone to probably your first Rise World Summit, but hopefully not your last. Also, as you know, as Deepak just mentioned, we have actually had over 3,600 people from 54 countries join us at the Rise World Summit. There's just so much happening. But one of the things that really make us unique and one-of-a-kind conference is that across 3 days and over 100 hours of programming, we have no panels and presentations. Every single format that is there has been curated to be as interactive as possible to send the messages that we believe are really truly important for our world. So I hope you get some chance and time to explore, as Deepak urged you to do. I would add to that as well. This is our 10th roundtable and our last day of the summit. So really, really special going into it. And I'm so pleased to be doing this with all of you and some amazing people at this table. And that's really the heart of what we do at the Rise World Summit. The theme of the summit is about innovation and diversity, again, because we want that message to go out that DNI, and of course saying it's time to change from DNI to IND, which means that, we need to stop thinking of diversity as an inclusion agenda. Instead, think of it as a driver of growth for innovation and of course, expansion. So this is really what it is, what the Rise Summit is about. And I'm truly pleased to be inviting all of you to join us on this journey. I am now going to hand it over to Namrata, who is the Director of Programs at Save the Children. And Namrata, to please introduce our opening address and keynote speaker. Thank you, Namrata. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And we are really looking forward to a very rich discourse on this very important topic of the Roundtable on Evidence on Child Rights, Data, Research, and Policy. So I would like to, just to set the tone, I would like to invite Sudarshan. Sudarshan is our CEO of Save the Children India, and he's got more than 30 years of experience, and he's a very passionate civil society actor and a child rights advocate, if I can say. Over to you, Sudarshan, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, and morning, everybody. And Karen, I'm struggling. Honestly, I'm struggling because I've got this big list of things which I want to read out. Favorite. On the other hand, I just love the idea, Karen, of the platform you've created, which is not of a monologue, but not even a dialogue, but a participatory, interactive process that we all talk to each other. It's not like wearing people down with long monologues. So I will have to give up a lot, but I would give it up lovingly, Karen, in the spirit of wanting this kind of platforms to grow, And if I may say in the lighter vein, one of the things that the pandemic of 2 years has unleashed is this onslaught of webinars and monologues also. So people may be exhausted of us. So that's one. The second part is, again, from the Rise Summit perspective, diversity. And I also look at the topic that we are talking in terms of child rights, data, and change at policy level. So we at SAVE, we are trying to marry two different schools of thought at the same time, both of which define our being and our theory of change. At one level, we believe small is beautiful, localization. Every spot defines what is needed there as a local ecosystem to take care of children. And children planning may take place, in Excel sheets, cells, rows, column, but children don't somehow exist in that. They are part of an ecosystem where everything happens around them on the same day at the same time. And unfortunately, for a large number in India of children, whatever happens, whatever can go wrong, goes wrong. So Save the Children is all about bringing predictability into their life, bringing consistency at the smallest level. And from there, bringing a method to scale for the government, because the government's mindset is of thinking big, acting big, and bringing effective change at scale. So our journey from our love for small is beautiful, every local ecosystem having its own needs, to thinking of a nation, of a larger community, the globe, and change. So we travel between these distances, the macro and the micro, on a balance rope. And how we have to do it, I mean, why I'm narrating this is that data and research then become really the enablers or the platform, and their absence becomes a disabler, because where we work and on the spot, data and research is a burden, it's seen at a distance. And where we want to bring things to scale, change at scale, if it's not data, if it's not research, then it's nothing, it doesn't exist. The truth is has to be contained there. So we are all about trying to organize all this into one context. We want more data and research people to immerse in action, ground realities, be able to capture all the distinguishing, unique, diverse features, and yet bring a method around them and tie them up for the government's language in terms of thinking at scale. So it's been a good life. I mean, in the sense, we've tried to bring method across from the voices. And one of the things we committed to last year, we call it the track report, the rights and agencies of children. It's to be an annualized report which we'll be bringing out from November 2022. And the idea is to bring everything and anything that's happening and not happening around child rights into one common reference point. And data and research will be what we will be riding on. So I look at today's platform as something, as a sounding board for us. More than a speaking board, we want to listen into all the people. We want to listen into whatever can go wrong. We want to listen into what kind of investments will work to make this happen. Quite often, data and research gets seen and buried as a cost. Cost sounds obnoxious for that, for the kind of larger purpose we want to serve. So what kind of investments are needed to make this theory of change into a practice? And even more aspirationally, if we have 700 plus districts in India, provinces, smaller context, we want to bring the 700 plus voices all on one platform, to be able to listen to them, for them to be able to exchanging notes with each other, and for everybody to kind of make the data truly rich. So I know typically from a statistician or a data person's opportunity that 5% sample, 10% sample, something can help drive a method, but I am not okay with it. I would like nothing less than 70, 75%, 80% of the ground information to come as data point, as becoming irrefutable. Because the cost of the absence of it is huge. And the cost is, that's where we need to see the cost. The cost of absence is 40% of our country is youth. And I would say safely 75% of this 40%, which means millions and millions of children, have not tasted what is freedom after 75 years of freedom of this country. Don't have any clue to rights. We may say child rights, but unless somebody else is fulfilling their duties, the child rights have no meaning. They are a good picture book comment at the right. So I'm looking at what will trigger to supply this data and research to government to stand up and say that our future is not going to be secure unless we act for the children today, now, here. And every little opportunity in policy, I think, needs to spell it out. And for us, I think we believe that data and research can have huge lasting feeding into this policy. Last but not the least, I come from heart as a die-hard practitioner of participatory processes. And I'm literally obsessed with it. And I also believe that in every process, the primary stakeholder's voice has to come forward, however imperfect that is, however diverse, chaotic, or however so to say, unsmart it is. I would like children to have their space. If policies about children are being talked about, if data and research is being, and this is something I'm not saying for India or Save the Children, I think globally it is relevant as a way of doing things. So for Save the Children, one is to do the right thing, but we also believe that the right way of doing things set things in motion. We would love to become redundant in the process eventually. That would be the significance or the success for us when the children have a voice, they have an agency, and we become the bystanders, simply catalyst and enabling. And what I'm looking forward to today is for all of you, and then subsequently to provoke us, to agitate us, and to load us with all the improbabilities. And we will take up that challenge to knit it all into one story and try and making it happen somewhere. Or the trying itself is important. I think the spirit, the first part, and I'll not. I mean, I'll just conclude again by saying we are committed to this marriage between small is beautiful and thinking at scale, and we are going to do the balancing act between both at the same time in the same places. I am here listening in, tuned in to all of you, and thank you again. Thanks, Rice, because I think not just this summit, but your design of this, I'm hoping will give many others a cue that we all can similarly organize open, diverse platforms to listen into people. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sudarshan. May I please ask you to be our ambassador?
I'm here, and
Thank you.
and I
Really
want to say
kind
yes
words.
before you start regretting it or turning back. Yes.
No, thank you very much. Those are very kind words. And I think the reason why you also said that is because so much of your thinking is just resonates so strongly with what we have as well, that everything has to be a participatory, process. And there are a lot of, issues we have when you keep the platform so open, which is why that message in the beginning also, so, people, of course, sometimes come across in different ways. But having a participatory process, having a diverse set of stakeholders, and making sure that the voice of the person for whom something is being designed for is part of that is so key, and I believe in it very strongly. Of course, because we also, for us, monitoring and evaluation is our core competency. So thank you very much. I think that was really brilliant beginning to it, and very gracious to even admit that you have so much more to say. However, I'm not there, doesn't stop over there, because the chat box is open for us in whatever shape and form. And of course, any material documents you want us to share, videos, we are more than happy to share it on the platform through the different facilities and features that are there. So look forward to hear a lot more from you, Sudarshan, because it'll matter a lot to a lot of people around here, and a lot happening because of that. With that, I'm going to get started with the roundtable and explain a little bit about the format, because as Sudarshan pointed out, it's truly one of a kind and very participatory, and we definitely want to make sure that everybody in the room gets a chance to voice themselves out, whether it is through the experts who are going to speak, or whether it is going to be through the chat box, or then through the Q&A. I guess many of you would have in the physical world also been in roundtables where we do this two-circle kind of approach, right? And so that's something that we have made sure that we have leveraged the technology as much as we could to make that happen. Unfortunately, we could not change the titles they were used over there, panelists and attendees. For us, there are no panelists and no attendees. There are only experts, thought leaders, and learners. So, and therefore, to help the learners, we ensure that they can use the Q&A. Incidentally, those in the inner circle cannot use the Q&A. There you go. See, there are always pros and cons to everything in life, right? So please use the chat box. Those of you who are in the inner circle, I'm sorry. While those who are in the outer circle, please use the Q&A box for your questions. I will request the experts to please do give your time to that as well. It's wonderful, many people say virtual is very difficult. It is, but then there are also cons. There are so many features that you can really leverage well. So here you can actually have a complete parallel conversation going, and not just parallel, multiple conversations. Can you imagine this happening in the physical world? You'd be shooed away, kind of a thing, right? No shooing over here, just showing. So please put your thoughts in the comment box, and of course in the Q&A as well in terms. And even if an expert has answered a particular question, I would encourage other experts to also answer that question. There's no one right answer. We all know that, right? So please go ahead and interact, engage with each other as much as you can right here on this. So the next thing I do want to also say is, because of the interest of time, and many people tell us that, oh my gosh, in this webinar world, more than 1 hour, nobody's going to sit in your roundtable. Well, let me tell you, every single roundtable has gone beyond the stipulated time. And because we have capped it at 10 to 15 minutes, which is why we have said, otherwise those discussions could have easily gone on for another hour. Yeah. And only the UNICEF one, no, we went beyond that 25 minutes. So please believe me, the time, every minute is really critical, and I'm going to keep quite very quickly as well. So to save time, we have no introductions, right? So again, I'm very grateful for the virtual space, because in the physical it was really difficult, having it in written, profile sheets and all of that. Instead, here I'm going to request all of you to put a very brief introduction about yourself in the chat box, so everybody gets a chance to know who's in the room and what is kind of the profile of the room, right? So do that real I'm sorry. So to put your introduction in this thing very briefly. When the experts speak, we will put your complete profile, just as I did for Sudarshan just now. We will put your complete profile over there, so that the room again knows a little more about you very quickly without spending time on that. So as you can see, we really try to save that time and use everything to its fullest. Last but not the least is the actual format, which is a signature methodology that we follow at the Rise World Summit. And this is really what we call the 3 C's, right? And the way we talk about is, we start with challenges, just because we believe that this is why we're come here. We're come here to find solutions. We're come here to find answers. We're come here to listen to other people's perspectives and get new ideas. So we start with the challenges. We will move to the capabilities, which is really about strategies, solutions, interventions, models. And last but not the least will be the collaboration. We are not talking about the need for collaboration. Everybody knows that, right? We are talking about what are the opportunities actually on the table, where someone can say, I need this help, and someone may say, I can do this for you. Or there are these kind of things that are happening out there which you can be a part of, or the projects, whatever it might be, right? So I would encourage all of you, please engage. And last but not the least, because it's so participatory, please feel free to put your hands up. But first, put it in the chat box so we know what you want to say, and we will pull you in at the right moment so that you get a chance to either be able to say or have your question or your comment addressed. So please do that, and please feel free to come in, as I said, but put it in the chat box first. And with that, I'm going to stop and really quickly hand it over to Namrata once again to take us forward as the moderator of this session. I'm just here to support the Namrata. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And like we said, it is a refreshing change to have a roundtable as it is supposed to be. It should be a roundtable with the ensuring that everyone has an equal space to say. But like we said, we do have some experts. So I will just quickly mention who the experts are, and I would also request Karen to just join me in introducing, if I've missed out on some people. So very quickly, we've got Dr. Melissa Burgess. She's the Asia Regional Head of Research, Evidence, Accountability and Learning for Save the Children International. We've got Dr. Vivek Viren Singh, who's a health specialist in UNICEF. Professor Zubair Minai, who's the Professor, Department of Social Work, and he's also an Honorary Director of Center for Early Childhood Development and Research at Jamia Millia Islamia. We've got Dr. Sunita Reddy, who's Associate Professor, Center for Social Medicine and Community Health from the School of Social Sciences of Jawaharlal Nehru University. And we've got Dr. Ashrita Sharan, who's the ex-director, Campbell South Asia, and she's currently the editor, IDCG, and co-convener of Campbell Cochrane Equity Methods Group. And finally, we've got Ritu Mathur, who's a development professional with an expertise in human development analysis and cross-sectoral issues and capacity development. Over to you, Karen. You may want to introduce the other experts also.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, so we have with us Hatani Zainuddin, who is a consultant and co-founder of the Yaya San Chow Kit. She has joined us all the way from Malaysia, and really, really pleased to have her with us. We also have Vinay Venmu. Oh, I'm sorry. I think you've introduced. Yeah, I think that's it for right now, and I will keep introducing as I keep seeing people join in. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. So like Sudarshan had already said, this space, we wanted to really have this roundtable looking at the importance and significance of evidence for child rights. And so that's going to be the real focus. And that's why the experts we have are, cutting across diverse components of child rights, and because we do have representatives from the Asia Pacific region, we've got a number of our experts are India specific, but we really hope that because we will have participants from different parts of the world, we want the debate to actually happen, really looking at the whole element of child rights with some illustrations from in country, whichever country the participants are being represented from. So as Karen said, the first component is going to be really looking at challenges related to evidence on child rights. So I would want to start with Dr. Melissa, and Mel, if I can, call her. Yeah. So Mel, it'll be great to hear, from your point of view as, the Asian regional head of, realm, because you do have an on-site in terms of what are the challenges vis-a-vis evidence and child rights at the Asia region, and also, covering the Asia Pacific region. So over to you, Mel. Just quick comments from your side would be very valuable.
Sure. Thanks so much, Namrata and everybody. I might just think about offering some insights from Asia and across the globe, because of course Save the Children is working in nearly 120 countries. I would say that, we're getting very good at understanding different populations and problems, particularly when it comes to the areas of the Sustainable Development Goals, but we're still seeing a lot of gaps within the data, particularly from least developed countries and also other countries or indeed regions such as the Pacific. The lack of data or insufficient data to establish a trend is quite important. Likewise, data at the sub-national level and applying an equity lens in monitoring the SGDs and also in understanding what works. So I think we've got so many experts here in particular thematic areas. Maybe one point that I'll raise here is really prioritizing and applying an equity lens. And so hearing the voices from the most vulnerable and excluded children and communities. So children themselves, as Sudarshan has said, could be considered such a cohort. But in particular, there's a lack of data representing children with disability, children on the move, whether they be internally displaced, asylum seekers or refugees, children who are off the grid. So when it comes to data collection, like living in urban slums or living on the street and not attending school. So I think reaching these and other minority groups is absolutely essential if we are going to leave no one behind when it comes to all of the areas which our joint missions support. In terms of evidence of effectiveness, I think this is a really key area of work for obviously creating change. And really understanding what works for whom, so all of these different cohorts and excluded groups, and in different contexts, whether it be different geographic contexts, but also differences between everyday development contexts and humanitarian settings. So I'd love to talk more about climate change and how that means for the world and Asia Pacific in particular, in understanding how we can respond and support children to become more resilient to climate change. What are children saying about climate change and how can we support them to advocate their rights? and really understanding what's working in humanitarian settings as they continue to increase in time and frequency. And I'll say one thing before passing over. I've got so many things to talk about today. But, you know, we're really prioritizing cross-sectoral research and evaluation and looking at the cumulative impact of integrated programming and multiple interventions for improving the lives and futures of children. So an example area that we're looking at is cross-thematic outcomes associated with Cash Plus and voucher assistance programs. And I think that there's a real key evidence gap when it comes to integrated programming and outcomes across all of the goals, and really having a deeper understanding of key intervention points in children's lives that actually can have that impact to change their life trajectory and the life trajectory of their families and communities. So I think I'll leave it at that for now, but certainly much more to offer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mel. And I think you've kind of, set the stage with really looking at this whole evidence gap, which we have, whether it is at the subnational level or from the equity lens. And I think that becomes very critical. And this whole the cross-thematic, engagements and data gap around those. What would be very helpful is that you've been able to give us the global as well as the Asia Pacific context. I would like to ask Ritu, because you've done a lot of work, on really looking at, monitoring data on child-related SDGs. So would you want to come in with some quick insights in terms of, if we just take India as an illustration, what would you feel has been a challenge vis-a-vis evidence on child rights in India and its effective use?
Yeah, so a very good morning to all of you. I'm really sort of passionate about this subject of data for monitoring, and the challenges are really humongous. And I mean, not only from an equity lens, but some very basic data that is required, let's say, for all children, that's not available. So coming to the actual data collection and how it operates part. So data collection is based on some framework, be it an international framework like the Sustainable Development Goal framework or the national government's own framework. It could be your 5-year plans, it could be your national indicator framework, it could be, but the way the monitoring data collection agencies or the statistical offices function is that their data collection plan is linked to some national or international framework. Now, coming to SDGs, which is the international framework that has been agreed upon by all the countries. We all know it has 17 goals and 169 targets. Of these 169 targets, potentially, 47 can relate to children because they talk about age-specific issues. Though not concretely, but then of course, lack of availability of data is a major challenge. Now, this is a mother statement, lack of availability of data is a challenge. So let's unpack some parts of it, not all, but some parts of it. First is, I would say, a lack of clarity on definitions per se, and even at the international level and also at the national level. So if there is no clarity on definitions, the statistical agencies are not really able to formulate indicators. Let me take one example. One of the indicators for poverty, for instance, talks about proportion of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions according to national definition. Now, children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions according to national definitions. Now, so I don't think there is an agreed upon, let's say, definition of child poverty, not in the country, not internationally. So there you go. Then one is proportion of children under 5 years of age who are developmentally on track in health, learning, and psychosocial well-being by sex. Now, again, this is desirable, but then how does one define psychosocial well-being, from a statistical point of view? So it's a mix, and I agree that there needs to be a marriage between what is understood typically by people who work in the field of child rights, and how it can be statistically measured. So there's no consensus. So one is, at a larger level, there is a lack of clarity on most of the definitions pertaining to child rights. The second I would say is that even at the international level, when we have the SDG framework, there is an exclusion of children of certain age in the way the indicators are being defined. So for instance, you have health related indicators, which are obviously, and I'm not saying that it's a problem, it's just because children as a homogeneous group covers a wide sort of age spectrum, each age group having its own sort of challenges, so to say. So for instance, in health, most of the measurement stops at 5 years of age, but then you have one or two indicators on violence, but they club 15 to 49 years. So if you look at the SDG framework, the age group 15 to 49 years has been clubbed. So let me just read out a few of them. So while we can say it's a proportion of, for instance, proportion of ever partnered women and girls aged 15 years and older subjected to physical, sexual, and psychological violence. So basically on violence, there is clubbing of children with, let's say, others. So then one misses out really on, let's say, what happens to the less than 15 years. So even at an international level, if the indicator is defined in a manner that there is an age group that is missing, leave aside the equity part. So we are talking of, violence in relation to, let's say, disabled children or street children, even at a macro level, there are children that are being missed out from the very way the indicators have been defined. And so that to me is a major challenge. And finally, I would like to, there are many parts to, why this happens, but I would just focus on 3 parts. I could go on forever and ever. So the third point I would like to say is the way the data is collected by government agencies, be it in the form of surveys or census. Of course, the missing children are then missed out because the unit of data collection is either the household, if it's a survey. Census ideally should be counting all children, but there are possibilities that some of the missing children are really missed while counting, even in the census. So, when one takes a household as a unit of surveys, large surveys, that obviously leads to exclusion of certain categories of very vulnerable children. I would say the most vulnerable are missed out definitionally, and when I'm saying missed out definitionally, I mean from the large sort of surveys. So I'm not saying the micro surveys that thematic surveys that take place and that are being conducted by a number of organizations. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking largely in terms of how the international and national data systems operate. So they are looking at large surveys for data collection, and the really vulnerable children are really being missed out, both from the point of view of definitions and from the way the surveys are being designed. So I would like to stop now and sort of over to you, Namrata.
No, thank you so much. And I think, as we are unraveling the whole element of challenges, this whole piece of equity, again, as Mel emphasized, and it has to do with, very rightly you said, and it is in terms of, how you are defining what has to be measured, and also the whole methodology of collection of data. And as Sudarshan stated, the evidence is not only being generated, it is different, disparate, partners and development actors who are actually responsible for data generation. But government is one of the key actor, and you cannot deny that a lot of our policies do get influenced by the kind of information which is being captured by our government system. So I think it's an important point, Ritu.
One more, if I may add, I noted many more, but one really I would like to squeeze in if time permits, which is actually using the data also which exists, because a large data does exist with the agencies, micro level or even macro level, but to the extent to which it is being used. So if it is only being used for a particular research study, then it sort of stays there. But if that data, let's say even at the grassroots level, if some village level survey is being done, if the panchayats can use it, so it need not become, let's say, a national part of a national discourse, but even if the local level functionaries or the panchayat committees that are being set up, if they are able to use it, then it has gone beyond the research domain to actually triggering some action. So whatever data is being used should ideally be used.
Sure, sure. And I think, just taking cue from this whole emphasis on how do we ensure not only the data which gets collected, but its use, I would want to kind of invite Ashrita. And then after that, Karen, it'll be good if there are some comments from the group you would want to take in. So just want to bring on Ashrita more from, really looking at this whole piece on how can we ensure, one is that whether there is an evidence gap, especially on this whole piece on certain issues like child well-being and child protection, and also in terms of how we can facilitate more effective use of data. So Ashrita, from that perspective, would you want to just quickly come in, and then we'll open it for other people from the group, who may want to either comment or add on to this whole element of challenges of data, and then we'll go to some of our other experts. Quick comments would be very helpful. Yeah, Ashrita?
Sure. So, I'm going to start with one important aspect of this child protection is it's gender. So if you talk about the literature on gender, it's quite prominent out there, and a lot of, experts and authors, they talk about gender. But once you map these studies, when I say maps, I'm talking about evidence and gap maps that we did on child well-being and child protection. What we identified from that even though so much talks are around the gender area, but once you map these studies, there are very few studies that where the intervention are specifically targeting boys and men to promote attitudes towards the gender equity. And the same is the case if we talk about the vulnerable section of the society, such as children with disabilities, or we talk about children belonging to low-income settings, or maybe indigenous groups or girls and women. And, we identified that the studies in terms of the effectiveness studies, as well as the qualitative studies in these sectors, they are very, very sparse. And this is where exactly your research plays a crucial role, because it provides the audience about what exactly is available and where exactly are the gaps. And this also aligns with your sustainable development goal. If I talk about a sustainable development goal 17, which emphasizes the increased need for investment in generating sound evidence for improved child well-being as well as for child protection. And this is where something called as evidence architecture or the evidence and gap map plays a very, very crucial role in terms of use of evidence. So when I talk about evidence architecture, it's basically a knowledge brokering pyramid, where the base of the pyramid, you will have all your studies related to impact evaluation, systematic reviews, and then curated into databases. And when you look at the top of the evidence pyramid, you will see the evidence decision-making tools in the form of portals, in the form of guidance and checklists. And evidence and gap map, they actually plays a link between the top of the pyramid there and the bottom of the pyramid. And it also emphasizes the need that currently we are moving from supply side of the research to the demand side of the research. And why evidence and gap map, they play this part is basically because in any sector, whenever you do evidence mapping, what you're doing is you're collating evidence in one area, and you are also identifying all the relevant research that have been done across LMICs or across globally in that particular evidence and gap map. And the main purpose of this evidence and gap map is that you collate the research, that's fine, but you also help identify where exactly the gap exists. And that is why mapping is basically considered as an evidence synthesis approach that describes where exactly the evidence is available and also highlights the key gaps. Now, coming to your point on how this evidence should be used and how this mapping can actually play a role in getting evidence into use. So what happens is, policymakers, what they require is a very, very curated and a very, very plain language summary kind of, overview about what exactly is available in terms of what is effective intervention and where we do not have anything. EGMs, they help you highlight those gaps between that. If I talk about child well-being, when we started this child well-being mega map, we did not have any idea how many studies would be actually available in that sector. And after mapping their exercises, we identified 484 systematic reviews in child wellbeing sector and LMICs, and that also collated 12 evidence and gap map. Now, evidence and gap map, you would say that 486 systematic reviews, that's great. We have so much of evidence out there, but that is not the case here, because once we started quality appraising those studies, we identified that most of those studies were actually of low confidence, and policy cannot be made on those low confidence studies. And the effort is not futile, because once we were able to identify that so many systematic reviews are out there and 50% of those are actually low and medium confidence, and we do not have high confidence systematic reviews, that is where the conversation needs to start. You need to collaborate with the research agencies, you have to collaborate with NGOs, you also need to collaborate with policymakers to identify where exactly are the gaps that these important areas of these systematic reviews are not following the quality appraisals, are of high methodology that can be used to define policies and to base our policy decisions on those things. Same as with the another map that we did on child protection.
Yeah, but I just intervene. Maybe we could go on, because we would be talking about some solutions,
Sure.
and I think these evidence gaps become an important, process to be able to address, and especially like you said, and I think what I'm taking from your conversation is, evidence gap vis-a-vis the whole elements of child protection, gender-based related interventions, and also child well-being, and the whole emphasis of data not being of good quality,
Yeah.
because if you don't have a high, like you said, high confidence level data, policymakers are not going to take you seriously. So that itself becomes a obstruction if you have to ensure, effective use of evidence. So Karen, over to you. Can you pull out, if there anyone from the group who wants to add in?
Yes,
Challenges? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I know why suddenly it's that time. Okay, so we do have with us Alok Vajpayee, who's been talking about some of the data challenges that he has faced. So Alok, would you like to come in real quickly and share with the group, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Alok Vajpayee. I would like to share about our experience, Population Foundation of India's experience about the data on online child sexual exploitation and abuse. I think in the country, this is an area where there is lack of evidence. Even the National Crime Record Bureau, which captures the data on this aspect, is not sufficient. So I think this is an area where we need to take measures and discuss the challenges and how this can be overcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alok. And I think also Hatini had a few points to make earlier in the chat box. Hatini, would you like to come in real quick?
No, just I'm actually listening and agreeing with and concurring with a lot of things that's already been said by the speakers, and we have the same challenges. But again, the issue for us, and we're doing a mapping program on foster care here in Malaysia, because we don't have a foster care that works in Malaysia. And, it's trying to start with missing children in orphanages. I think that was mentioned in the Q&A section. We don't know how many children are actually missing because both parents died, and we don't know who are orphans. We're trying to map all of that out, and we're having the same challenges as what's happening in India as well. So I'm actually listening as we go along, and I'm quite happy to add my comments in the chat group. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Over to you, Namrata.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I would like to also invite Professor Minai, because we are talking about this whole element of evidence gap. And, like Ashrita did mention, this whole emphasis on child well-being. So Professor Minai, would you want to share from your experience, challenges vis-a-vis, where you feel there are gaps in India and also, elsewhere, when we have to really look at the whole element of child rights and certain sectors or issues of children who you feel are not being really covered by enough data or evidence or research. Over to you, Professor Minai. Quick comments from your side would be very valuable.
Yeah, thank you very much, Namrata. I come as a user of the data that we are talking about, and I talk from an early childhood perspective and also as a researcher. Now, I just have very quick points to make. The first one is in response to what Sudarshan talked about, the child participation thing. I think there is no research or evidence available of why we are not able to enlist child participation from the adult world, and what are the kind of say perspectives of the children on the participation themselves. So a child-led research where we learn from children themselves on what allows child participation in traditional societies like the Indian society is very much required for us to then start talking about child participation in its entirety. So that's one thing that I wanted to share. And then the coming from the early childhood perspective, that is below 6 or below 8, whatever category you talk about, we find that there is very much in the Indian context, most of the evidence and data is very much ICDS focused. And no doubt it is the largest program in the world. Yet we have very little information on what is the proportion of children who have been left out of the ICDS system. And there are a lot of guesstimates which say 45%, 50% coverage by the ICDS. So even if it is 50% coverage, we have no information or evidence or studies about the rest of the left out population. And that is what I am mostly concerned about. You can get a lot of data from the ICDS system, particularly on the survival and other things, but we are not able to get a hang of what exactly is happening with the rest of the population of children in the 0 to 6 or 0 to 8 age group. So that is one major concern that I would like to highlight. Then within the ICDS system, if you see the last speaker talked about clubbing and other things about definitional. So when you start talking about supplementary nutrition, you will get government figures which club pregnant women and children together. And therefore, you don't know how many children are getting nutrition, how many women are getting nutrition. There is very little data on how many Anganwadis which are functioning, how many of them are actually offering early childhood education on a regular basis, on an irregular basis. So, for example, when you look at all these things, like there's no quality control, there's no such thing as rating and ranking kind of thing which is available. But my concern is that we have been looking at data of, let's say, the survival category, and we have a lot of information on stunting and underweight children and so on and so forth. But we need research on why this data remains stagnant for so long. Why is it, and where is it where is this stunting and low weight actually happening? Is it happening where we have interventions, or is it happening where we have no interventions? Why is the proportion of underweight children increasing in the country? And why is stunting and stagnating and not reducing? Why we have not been able to reach full immunization yet? So the why questions, like the evidence is not just hardcore data, but also the reasons behind why this is happening. And that is what I think we need to focus on. And lastly, just one quick, I think I'll reserve that for my later presentation. These are some of the challenges from an early childhood, which I could think of. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Minay, and also thank you for capturing this whole piece on children's participation. I think there is a lot of evidence gap also in terms of, children's participation in our development interventions and schemes and programs. And is it really happening? And I think it's important, not only data, sir, but like you said, even the reason behind the evidence and the why is it so that, I think that becomes very important. And many times we get caught only in seeing just the numbers and then trying to interpret it. But there is a lot of story which is behind it. So I would really want, because you did talk about this whole element of undernutrition. So I would want to, call on Dr. Vivek Viren Singh, and because he's been doing a lot of work. And Dr. Viren, from your side, in terms of evidence, especially on child nutrition, I think those would be, and health-related issues, your insights, more from a challenge point of view, because right now we are just discussing, the challenges vis-a-vis evidence and data and research on child health and child nutrition.
Sure, Namrata. And can you confirm if I'm audible? There is some construction going on nearby, which is totally
No, we
unavoidable.
can. We can, yeah.
Now, I was listening to other colleagues. Let's talk about the challenges. We all have understood that sound evidence is the foundation for any effective or which could be effective policy actions and programmatic interventions. But I'll begin at something very basic. We all are talking about data, but let me borrow this from Melissa's office title: research, evaluation, learning, accountability also, and then monitoring and evaluation. Do we, and when I say do we, do the stakeholders understand the importance of each of these elements? And I especially like the accountability part, and these are the challenges. So when, say for example, when UNICEF, during the kind of emergency that we are in globally, the pandemic, when we talk about core commitments for children in our humanitarian actions, we say that all the stakeholders should be accountable to the populations being served. And to be able to do that, they need information to be able to measure that what is it that they are supposed to be accountable for it, accountable for it, and how are they going to measure that accountability? So, understanding in the total REAM, as this acronym was, is some of the basic challenges. And let me specify. So when we talk of the nutrition data value chain, and one of the colleagues mentioned about the pyramid, from where the data is produced to how it is used, and all this information. I'm again using data loosely for all of this. An example, let's come back to India, that the 5 to 14 age group, and some of the others also speakers alluded to, is an age group where there is very little systematic effort to get evidence, spatial level, thematic level, and vulnerabilities. Another very important challenge is, in real time, if 1/3 of our kids are born low birth weight, do we actually know in real time, near real time, where are we getting these kids in higher proportion in terms of their low birth weight? And what can we do about it? So that's not available. Incidentally, Government of India, with UNICEF support a decade ago, they started nurseries called special newborn care units for the small and sick newborns, which now have a captive cohort, footfalls of about 1.2 million babies coming to these nurseries. And we are seeing that in real time, the proportion of low birth weight that otherwise come out of studies is similar. And these are babies which can actually be tracked longitudinally to see what is their developmental outcome. But are we looking at these ways to expand it nationally, and how can we do it? We can always talk of the solutions later. Another important challenge that we find is that we have to understand that for programs at scale, when we are talking of policy actions and programmatic interventions, and if we have to nest all of this monitoring, evaluation, learning mechanisms within these programs, we need capacities. And translation of all the evidence that we have to policy action and programmatic interventions requires a lot of capacities. Now, there is something called implementation science, that we need to understand that what works in real world may have multiple factors which are very contextual, local. So unless people, stakeholders who have to take action, they understand all of this, it will be very difficult. So building capacity for implementation as a science, as a research, building capacity for being able to translate all the evidence that we collect. So I think it is at multiple stages of this information to action value chain that we lack capacity. And one specific, another example for we have the frontline.
Yeah,
sorry, the last point.
Yeah, the last comment, yeah.
Yeah, so the frontline health workers who take, for example, the weight, how many kids in the country actually get weight at the time of birth? So there are some basic challenges, but these are very obvious challenges that can be and needs to be addressed.
Thank you. I think, I think, they're very valuable, this whole element of, using data and evidence and ensuring that, it helps to build accountability of different development actors. And I'm very happy that you actually brought about this whole element of capacity. So this whole piece on how do you ensure, and I think it would not happen on its own. And capacity is at different level. It is within the government chain, whether it's also within civil society organizations, academics, frontline workers. There's so much of data being collected, but how do we really ensure that it gets so that finally it translates into action or policy action or programmatic action? So thank you so much. And I think when we are talking about solutions, I think that would be an important area to really focus a lot more on, also in terms of strengthening. Yeah, Karen, over to you. If there anything else, then we will have one more expert.
No, I think we can continue. I'm just kind of keeping everybody conscious about the time, because without us even realizing it, and
it's been an hour. Yeah.
It's been an hour, right? So I'm just hoping that, and I think that was a beautiful points that Vivek made, that really takes us into the next segment of capacity and capabilities. So I'm just kind of flagging that out over here. But other than that, please go ahead.
Sure. No, Karen. So what I would do is I would just invite Sunita. Sunita Reddy, you could, if you could come in more from this whole element of challenges vis-a-vis child protection, and also what would be some of your, recommendations in terms of, how can we address, so we could then initiate the conversation on also solutions and capabilities. So maybe you could try clubbing both those and set the stage for the next conversation. Over to you, Sunita. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Namrata. Let me give a brief background where this whole thing is coming from. Trained in anthropology and teaching public health, and also passionate about the topic on children, I've ventured into this area of research. And I actually wanted to, first of all, bring the issue of children and their childhood. When you look at David Lancy's work on anthropology of childhood, clearly talks about three different kinds of children who are, say, cherubs, who are basically the precious and the innocent, and those who are unwanted are as changelings, and I think that's the most vulnerable, and of course the commoditized chattels. So we need to really understand the multiple childhoods, graded vulnerabilities based on the axes of caste, class, gender, ethnicity, region, and also differentially abled childhood. So for any research, I think we need to prioritize who are at risk and who are the most vulnerable. And that's where I think we need to build our evidence. And when we look at the limited resources, we need to really put our resources to the right place. And that's where I think we need much more evidence and having a very good resources within India. Having, say, all the large national level data, be it NFHS or Childline or NCRB, ICPS and POXO, we still are lacking on data, because this is just a tip of iceberg. And we need to really understand that the studies earlier have shown that mostly the children are violated by the people known to the child. So there is a whole conspiracy, or I can say culture of silence, whereby mostly the data doesn't come out. Even there are no court cases. POXO is a stringent law. Despite that, we can see that the crimes against children are increasing day by day. So we basically have to look into more of social issues, social values, cultures, norms, and also taboos when related to children, and also try and understand what are these factors which have to be looked at. And especially that comes through a lot of qualitative research, which again we are lacking, especially looking at children. There has to be a seriousness in terms of crimes against children, mostly happening to children who are from poor and marginalized. And we are not asking, say, hard and uncomfortable questions related to power and resources to question the structural violence which is there in the country. And we have seen that children trafficked are missing, and for all of the reasons we all know about forced labor or sex or even organ donations. There are missing children. There is a nexus of local criminals, sometimes politically powerful people backing them up. And that's where many of these hard questions, which are very uncomfortable, are not being asked. I'm trying to just lay the ground for that, and media covers some of these issues, but public memory is very short, and that's where the next day the business is as usual. We have a very good provisions. Indian Constitution gives multiple provisions, nearly a dozen, and direct state to promote the welfare of children and ensure their dignity and sustainability. Despite that, we can see that the crimes are increasing. And we also have well-laid policy legislation, schemes like ICPS, JJ Act, CWCs, and all juvenile justice boards are there. And we also have
yeah, so Sunita, if you could maybe some critical recommendations or some solutions, because I know you've kind of highlighted this whole element of emphasis on qualitative research, this whole focus on really, we need to be able to also define childhood. So any last quick recommendation or solution which you may, put forward from your side?
So I see that there are organizations, the community-based organizations, there are organizations at the international level and having a ministry, but my concern is that not all of us are coming together. There has to be a concerted effort. There has to be coalitions and networks, and we need to form pressure groups for advocacy and implementation of all schemes. I think it's very important to complement the strengths of each of the organizations. We need to build on the awareness building through different mediums. We have just started with one digital magazine, Childhood Matters. I can share that later. And there are also very good initiatives like child-centric disaster risk reduction with NIDM, and even Zubairji is there in Jamia, where you have child focus centers. I think what we need is to really have focused research component, because India is so diverse, we need to address the local context, the culture of childhood, child rearing, and that's where the micro level qualitative research will add evidence to the whole issue. And we can also have IT management, of management information systems. We need to build that and complement with the research. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for highlighting this whole focus on the child well-being, childhood, as well as importance of child focus centers to be really looking at qualitative research, journals which are really looking at childhood and child-related interventions. So I would like to go back to Mel, because Mel, you did talk about the larger global perspective and the Asia Pacific perspective in terms of the challenges. So would you want to share some critical 2-3 key solutions or capabilities to be able to address the evidence gap as well as the challenges we are facing vis-a-vis child rights?
Sure, thank you, Namrata. Prompted by a few of the conversations just now, Save the Children is investing in a global results framework where we are drawing on evidence frameworks and synthesis for our common approaches, which are evidence-based programs that we do roll out. We have a strong priority at the moment on cost effectiveness. So of course, evidence of impact and effectiveness and quantitative data is critical for this, particularly when it comes to scalability. But I also want to draw on the fact that qualitative information, particularly in development and humanitarian context, is absolutely essential, especially when we're looking at community-led interventions. And I see a lack of data on how effective community-led interventions are and how they can be replicated at scale by government and other actors. Some particular gaps that we're interested in is in child protection and socio-emotional well-being, and also in climate resilience. So, partnerships with civil society organization will be really important for this, even potentially filling those gaps with government-led data collection. Could there be opportunities for partnering with academia, NGOs or civil society in collecting census information or analysing and presenting it. We've heard a lot about engaging children, and a key evidence gap is, what works best in actually engaging children and young people to influence institutional policy and legal changes. And interestingly, how do these processes influence their own sense of well-being? So we're drawn to remember that children have a right to be heard. They have that right to participate in decision-making and to find out information and think for themselves and advocate. So this is definitely something on our agenda, and how we work with civil society in more local processes. There's been some messages in the chat about online safety and also in participatory research, and safeguarding children is absolutely fundamental as we continue to involve them and work with them in child-led research and advocacy. Online safety in particular is an area where we potentially have evidence gaps, and what works to help children advocate for their rights in various digital media, but keep them safe and protected from a variety of different harms. Probably that's all for now, Namrata. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mel, and thank you for emphasizing again this whole element of, really looking at evidence frameworks and synthesis, emphasis on quality data, and also having processes and mechanisms so that, if we are really looking at engaging children in participatory processes, their safety is ensured, especially where we are talking about child-led advocacy and research-related interventions. So thanks a lot, Mel. I would also request Professor Zubair, if you have any critical recommendations, specifically also related to some of the challenges you've shared, vis-a-vis the whole element of government data and its use, and yeah. So over to you, Professor Milay.
I think we are now talking of probably solutions. Is that right, Namrata?
Yes. Some of the recommendations and solutions.
Some of the recommendations. Yeah, I think before we get into the recommendations, we also have to kind of be mindful of the quality of data that we are talking about. And I think the lady from Campbell had clearly highlighted that there is a lot of evidence, but most of it is kind of doubtful in that sense. So whatever evaluations take place, they do not necessarily help us in painting a bigger picture, because they are very, very program specific or specific locale, and therefore someone from amongst us has to take up that job of synthesizing all that information to be able to kind of arrive at some kind of conclusions about what exactly is going on in a particular subsector or in a larger sector. So that is one thing that is important for us, because any kind of inconsistent or poor or not transparent methodology is not going to help us. Now, if you recall, Mobile Crashes had recently just brought about a report on the state of the young child, and they had developed two very interesting child indices. One is the Young Child Outcomes Index. The other is the Young Child's Environment Index. Now, these are attempts which are quite good in the sense that they are leading us towards kind of trying to find out what exactly is happening, and if that can be replicated by other people, or if there can be a network of like-minded organizations where you can, because like it or not, our over-reliance on government data is one of the issues, and number two, the kind of haziness around government data that has been happening over the last so many years is also a matter of concern. So we will have to develop our own systems and mechanisms. So maybe you invest more in high quality research so that you gather more evidence, and also collaborate to develop good indices. And third, as a user, A good high quality research often is unintelligible also to the common person. We have to see who is the user. It's not just always the policy makers who are the users of research. It is the lowest NGO at the grassroots level who would want to have some kind of evidence. And these kind of fancy, sophisticated studies often do not make sense to the common man. So it has to be translated into very simple, understandable knowledge that has been generated out of that system. So that is, I think, that link between the evidence and decision making has to be there, but that we have to be mindful of the fact that decision making can happen at all levels, and therefore our research and evidence has to cater to all levels.
Thank you so much. And I was just looking at Karen, if there is anything from the group, if someone would want to come in terms of some submissions.
Ritu has been posting quite a bit. Maybe we could bring her in right
Yes,
now.
Ritu?
Yeah, so yeah, very, very interesting, and discussions also in terms of solution. So, I mean, just by way of a brief background, I was fortunate to have worked with UNDP on human development reports for more than 10 years. And one thing I realized, I mean, I might be digressing a little bit. Why was the Human Development Index a success? Primarily because it was very easy to communicate and simple. So, you know, taking on from what Professor Zubair also said, anything that is collected and researched upon has to be able to communicate. I mean, it need not be a policymakers, but that research has to be used by someone. It could be a local NGO on the ground, and the message should reach. So, in terms of solutions, one of the first thing that I would say is focus on few comprehensive and comprehensible, indicators, which are very easy to communicate and are common across civil society members or the government. You know, there might be 2, 3, 4, but at least have those in place definitionally and in terms of mechanisms for data collection, because this is cost intensive. Collecting data is cost intensive, so all efforts must be made. So partnerships amongst agencies and organizations that are working on the field, collect only what will be used by anyone. You know, so it should not ideally be research for the sake of research. Also, advocacy. I was looking at the discussion on nutrition data or information. You know, again, I worked on one of the large monitoring, which was the ICDS, for a number of years. What I realized was that, you know, the frontline health worker is burdened with collection of huge number of data, of which they have absolutely no capacity. You know, so your village level worker, the Anganwadi worker, fills in a form which has 100 columns or 120 columns. This is, I'm talking about many years ago. But finally, no one uses the data, for instance, on malnourishment from ICDS. Everyone waits for the National Family Health Survey for the data on malnutrition. So if you are overburdening frontline workers with data collection and not eventually using it, then it's a wastage of resource, time, and effort. So, so also in terms of advocacy, this parallel data collection mechanisms, I'm sure it's happening also with civil society members. Many agencies are parallelly collecting data and investing individually. Why not come together and sort of harness on the synergies? So in terms of
so Ritu, yeah, I think this is, I would just like to intervene because it's a very important point you're making. And, after you, I would really request, I know I saw Annie in the group. So if Annie also would want to come in, because from a civil society perspective, and they've been doing some great work, really looking at data being pulled up from civil society organizations. And so that, like Professor Minai said, I think our over dependence on the government system. So Ritu, post your final comment, I would want to request if Annie, you would want to also just share what we have been doing and what you've been doing, under the Vadana Toro intervention, especially on the Leave No One Behind.
Yes, yeah. So there's 2 points. One is resolve the issue of definitions and come to consensus. That will help everyone. And I'm not only talking about government, I'm a data user, so I'm not a government person, but as a data user, when I go around scouting for data, definitionally, there are different sort of indicators being used, age groups being used, and that may be for very specific purpose. I'm not saying that, it was done in an ad hoc manner, but I'm saying if there is a consensus on definitions, if there is a consensus on partnership, we data users would be in a much, much better position. So those are the two.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Annie, would you want to come in? I did see her. So yeah, if not, then I would just request, is she there? No, we can't hear you.
I have moved her to the inner circle, but I can't hear. Brajesh is the other person who's been posting. I was just going to say both their names, Annie and Brajesh.
Yeah, Annie, maybe, yeah, we can't hear you. So maybe Brajesh may want to come in.
Yeah. Now I think I can speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, Annie. Yeah.
Thank you. Congratulations, Namrata, and all the rest of the people for really putting together and to Rice World for this very interesting way in which you've taken up this whole conversations. Yeah, we've been, I sort of just posted that I'm part of the Vadana Todo Abhiyan, which is like a national level campaign of civil society organizations. And we do a lot of work on governance, accountability, and SDGs. So one of the things that with the use of SDGs, what we realized is like India with its diversity and complexity, the state data doesn't really represent the large majority of vulnerable populations. Like we will have a scheduled caste data, but it is so minute and limited that thousands of communities which are on the margins do not get represented. And we have no idea of how the particularly vulnerable tribal group or a nomadic group or a Musahar community. So we felt it will be important to get community generated data of these communities and be able to look at where they stand in relation to the rest of the national development. So SAVE has also been part of one of our initiatives, which we call the 100 hotspots, where we help train community volunteers to gather household level data in a representative sample from 100 households in a very specific geographic location. So the idea is, how does this small community fare with respect to the larger issues? And we did things like bonded labor, the Saharia community, the Musahar community, the Kond tribes, nomadic tribes. So in one of the studies we did children from these communities. I know we do diversity, we do bring in diversity when we look at children, but again, how does the education of a bonded child labor group really fare with respect to the rest of children? So I would just like to say how important, and we've also been working with the UN statistical data division to see how the leave no one behind principle can be used to really, bring data. So the 100 hotspots has been spotted as one of the good practices under the sustainable development practices too. So I just want to say that we need to really try and help communities to have the agency to build their data and how that can be brought into the larger data sets to complement. Currently, we're doing one with UNICEF where we've sort of got 20 districts and 800 volunteers from across the country where we are looking at impact of COVID on vulnerable communities. So I just want to say that the effort to build capacities of community organizations would be something very important if we want to really move data into the forefront. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annie. And, because you're just leading me to call on Dr. Vivek, because you've talked about this whole emphasis on capacity building of, civil society organizations, especially the community-based organizations. And Dr. Vivek, would you want to just come back on your point on, the fact that there is a capacity gap vis-a-vis, translation of data so that it gets translated effectively to be able to do policy action implementation. So some some key 2-3 solutions from your side would be very, very, very helpful to take this conversation forward.
Sure, Namrata, and at the cost of overemphasizing what Annie said. So recently at the 53rd session of the UN Statistical Commission, there was a major side event on how do we engage citizens in monitoring and reporting on SDGs. So this is a very important point, and especially creating that agency, empowering them as right holders and informing them who are the duty bearers, not just the government, there are many. And then actually training them, empowering them to be able to do this, to monitor and report on some of the development. And this is a very important point, and I think it's been mentioned by others also. Now, a second and last point in terms of what can be done, again, I'll go back to investment in capacity at each level of the value chain. And emphasizing on the point that Sunita made, that from the very first point, that you prioritize that which are likely to be the most vulnerable sections, any stratifier that you may use. And that is where you start putting your resources, and then you build capacity in each of the value chain. So for example, I think in one of the references, it was being mentioned about the value of systematic review. But what we reviews and the evidence that is available, but what we keep forgetting is the power in the gray. And that is where, for example, if you look at the institutes in India, which are producing good quality so-called published literature, I can name people. You can name people, we can name institutions, but we need evidences which are contextual, local, that why a solution is working at a place X and why is it not working at Y. So specifically, tribals in Northeast, some of the solutions are working there vis-a-vis children, their nutrition, their survival and development, whereas tribals in Orissa and else places, the same solution is not working. So what we need to do is we need to create networks of the institutions and agencies that can generate good quality evidence. We need to then use these networks to build capacity at the local level so that contextually relevant information can be available, both for informing policy actions at the higher level to programmatic actions on the ground at the front lines. So from my side, we can make a final statement at the end.
Right. No, very valuable. And I think I really like this idea about networks of institutions and this whole linkage of micro and macro and capacity building investment. I think, not enough is being done. And I think that is being re-emphasized by different experts, because you did mention, this whole piece on systematic review. So, Ashrita, would you want to come in terms of, some critical solutions, because you did start talking about those evidence gaps, and I think, some of those elements, it would be very helpful for us to see how effectively, not only in terms of the kind of quality of data which gets used, but how can we actually synthesize and ensure that data is used in a meaningful manner, it's available in a meaningful manner for users at different levels, because there would be, so I think some insights from your side would be very helpful in terms of some, 1 or 2 key solutions which you can provide based on your work.
Okay, great, thanks. So like I was mentioning earlier, the evidence and gap maps, they are basically, a tool which makes your evidence highly discoverable and highly, accessible for use. And this is, again, it makes it everything, it provides a systematic approach to strengthening the inclusion of the rights of all the children. In terms of how you use it, so I'll give you an example. So we started with the child well-being mega map, okay? And there were a lot of gaps that were highlighted as a result when that map was completed. The gaps were in the area of child protection, the gaps were in the area of child marriage, the gaps were in the area of child labor, and of course, in terms of population, if I talk about children with disabilities or children belonging to minor communities or indigenous communities were the key gaps. Now, when you do an evidence and gap map, it's not a means to its end. You have to do something about it. So as soon as we identified that child protection as the area where we had the least evidence, we did another map on violence against children. And though that violence against children, again, helped map the studies on violence against children, again, help highlight the areas where we did not have evidence. For example, if I give you example from South Asia, there's a very important intervention category that talks about laws and crimes related to children. And we found zero studies from South Asia that actually talked about laws and crime, because this was also the least studied area in the LMICs. But if we talk about South Asia, we had no studies in that. Similarly, there were intervention like safety intervention, like safe places to play. That again had the least amount of interventions and the studies in those areas. Similarly was corporal punishment, bullying prevention, and there were a lot of other areas in regional areas as well where these gaps were identified. Now, as a next step to this, what we did was, now we are identifying priority areas to do systematic reviews in the areas of these evident and gap maps. Okay, and also, there are areas, like I mentioned, laws and crime, where you do not have impact evaluation, so you can't really do a systematic review. So this is the time where we have to go and collaborate with the local, researchers, and we have to collaborate with local government to help generate evidence in terms of impact evaluations in these areas. And how you do it, it's basically, again, go about collaborating. So what we need currently to do generate evidence in those areas is joint profiling of evidence for children synthesis, and of course identifying outputs at key events, including like this, where we talk about what evidence exists and who's doing those kinds of evidence. The next important thing that I want to highlight here is, as a result of these maps that we did, we also were able to identify the key challenges and barriers to why we have so much of low methodological, standards in these studies. One important thing I think everyone has highlighted is there's a lack of clear definition of violence and interventions related to violence or related
What
to
would be
child
your
protection.
solution? So some critical solution, if you could maybe highlight, Ashrita, and then I'll just move on to Mr. Brajesh because his hand is up. In terms of,
Okay, so in terms of solution, I would say there's a strong need to jointly advocate the need to improve global evidence architecture. And one can do it by exploring joint fundraising opportunities in this area, seeking to identify additional partners who support evidence for children. And like I mentioned, violence against children or child protection is a very wide range of disciplines. So there's a strong need to incorporate multidisciplinary and multi-method perspective in the research design. And also there's a strong need to coordinate a common global research agenda or regional agenda that direct the priorities designed to improve both the methodology as well as interventions related to child protection and child well-being in this area.
Thank you, Ashrita. Yeah, I'm sorry because I'm just mindful of the time. Mr. Brajesh, I'm really sorry.
In fact, Namrata, I was going to also say that, we are coming into the last half an hour of the session. Yes. And so we need to also start talking about offers of collaboration, opportunities for collaboration. Over to you, Namrata, and of course, Brajesh to take it further.
Yeah, Mr. Brajesh.
Okay, I'm audible?
Yes.
Yes. And there was some issue, and I agree with the speakers, different speakers, or a collection of network of agencies and government collaboration also. But what I want to emphasize, there is need to take this collaboration and network at the deep level of rural area. Basically, maximum the children which are on the streets, which are in the slums, are coming from the rural area, and there is need to emphasize and capacitize the CBOs working in the rural areas and to develop the mechanisms and evidence from the rural areas. Whatsoever the system India has got, it is overburdened. At the different shelter homes, there are more than 54,000 pending cases for the JJB itself only in the state of Uttar Pradesh. It's a huge one, and it is spoiling the life of children. And what in terms of solution, I want to say that unless and until we will reach to the rural areas, the source areas from where the children are running out, where the children are coming to the bigger cities or smaller towns to be street children, or they are coming to live in slums. So we will have to penetrate our rural areas and to generate a common consensus on definitions, what some speaker have already said. This is the one solution point, and this can be done, and there are good reasons for that if it is being implemented. Second thing is that there is nothing from the government side. Recently, the Supreme Court has also intervened, and they have talked about to rehabilitate the street children. what I want to say, that the child in itself is an agency, and it has got multidisciplinary interventions are needed. The emotional issues are there, the physical issues are there, the belonging and love issues are there. Their rehabilitation is needed, and there is a need to have an individual approach for the each child. So it is not possible by through one agency. Definitely, the network of agency and collaboration should be in a very proper manner should be done with the common consensus of definitions, these evidences, and the projects should be common projects should be implemented, involving the government also. But normally the system doesn't activates without the intervention of courts or higher these implementers. I mean to say the higher bureaucracy level. So something, a pressure group of this network has to be made so that they can act, because house is on fire. There is very pathetic situation. I am here in Gorakhpur. We have done collected the survey of 524 children, and we have reintegrated them with their families, and including 114 of trafficking. And there is pathetic situation. This Gorakhpur location is just near to Nepal and the most backward area of Bihar. And regularly the children are coming on the streets, on the slums, and they are being transferred and being bluffed by different traffickers to the different locations, even of the world also. So there is what I want to emphasize: the house is on fire. We will have to act very swiftly and in a very prompt manner with a consensus of all the things which other speakers have also said. And we will have to
Rajesh,
penetrate
yeah.
our activities up to the rural areas.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. And I think, like you said, very rightly, you've put it, the house is on fire and we all need to really collaborate and come together. So Karen, as you stated, we are on the final stage of this whole element of how do we collaborate. So do you, Karen, would you want to come in terms of what is your expectation for this final piece, so that, it is not just conversations, but how can we take it? There have been some very powerful recommendations, and there's an overemphasis on that. There is evidence gap. We do require quality evidence from different levels from micro to macro, to be able to ensure that finally the rights of children are met. So in terms of the collaborative piece, over to you, Karen. Maybe if you could just help guide the conversation so that we kind of conclude in a meaningful manner.
Absolutely. No, I think it's been fantastic. We've actually gone through the whole process of, identifying the kind of challenges we have, and of course, in terms of the capabilities, the capacity that is required to meet those challenges, right? And I think in terms of the collaboration, Melissa, you have your hand up. Do you want to say something real quick? Happy to let you go. Would you like to come in?
Sure. Thank you so much. Just saying that I think Elra used to do some partnerships dating platform. I haven't seen it around, but I think, look, let's do some searching and see if something like that exists again. Please reach out to myself and others if you're a member of consortia. Happy to share our learning agendas to look at co-investment in evidence reviews or partnering with research. We've mentioned data sharing. Perhaps we could reach out to UN Statistics or another large body to look at data sharing platforms. And we really do need to take seriously, because there was a big data breach on servers belonging to a big INGO only this week. Campbell's on the line here. Maybe we can talk more about utilization of utilization-ready evidence. So I'm thinking evidence-based log frames and theories of changes ready to go and share. And of course, a big priority solution here, of which Saves the Children is always willing to work with partners on, is including children and how to do so safely, really harnessing their agency, their innovation, their enthusiasm and passion and ability to think outside the box. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I think that's exactly the kind of offer we want from others also, to come onto the table saying that this is what they would like to do, taking it forward. And of course, you can put it in your thing. Hatmi, before you leave, I know you've got to run to another thing, but if you want to quickly maybe come in, and who knows, we can have cross-country collaborations as well happening over here. So are you there still, or have you left? Maybe she's left already. Okay, no problem. That's fine. But I'm not sure what's with this, but every time I start talking on this, it starts going. Okay, so very quickly, I think the idea over here in the collaboration bit is to say that do you have any thoughts in specific? We all know collaboration is great. We all know we need to do it, but can we do it, right? And so what are those offers on the table, or what are those asks? Maybe some people can start with an ask. I'm looking for this. Of course, we're not going to find all the answers right now in 2 hours. It's not possible. But can that be the beginning of a conversation that continues post this one into maybe more regional conversations, sectoral conversations that could perhaps lead into partnerships, alliances, and projects on the ground? And you can start with as simple as being a resource person for another project, as a consultant, as a partner. It can be anything, right, in that sense. So this is really what we hope that comes out of a roundtable like this. And I would definitely say that, if you think that it is difficult to say too many, yes, Annie, I've just 2 more seconds and then you can definitely come in. Please either come in or then, of course, put it on the chat box as to what is it that you're looking for and how do you think you could collaborate with somebody else so that we have specific actions and recommendations to go forward. Yes, Annie, please come in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think this action collaboration is really a great point to meet together. See, we are very much planning on developing a public data dashboard from civil society organizations of data of very vulnerable communities. We've already done about 35 communities and we want to do more. So we would like collaboration, both technical, financial, human, wherever we can build in, so that we would like a portal where we can create a dashboard where civil society generated data, I mean, with all due robustness, can be made available and people can put in and people can use it in various ways. So we would really like to get collaboration from, in this process over the next 1-2 years. We want to really build it up. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Annie. That's the specific things we are looking for. Sukendu has also put his hand up. Sukendu, you can speak. Please go ahead. Sukendu, can you? Okay. Okay, Brajesh, yeah, you can go ahead really quickly, please.
Yes, with our action research project, we have found very deep-rooted reasons of the various concerns of children. So we want to collaborate with other people who can help us out to work on the solutions we have found. We have found we are working on SEL of the children's social emotional learning for them, art-based process for them. We are building the individual childcare and rehabilitation plan of each and every child which is in contact with us. We have also done the survey in the 28 wards of the Gorakhpur city and found 2070 child labors. So we want to implement all the solutions we have found during the research, why the children are running, what are the frequency of the reasons and penetration. So we have started our work in the source areas also. What I was talking about, to reach at the deep rural areas. So we are implementing the things over there also on their parents also. So we want to collaborate with different organizations to implement all these solutions and what they will offer to us. And we can also share our research data. And it is very important location, this Gorakhpur, which is just near to the Nepal and the backward area of the eastern part of Bihar. And there is too much frequency of trafficking, the slum children, the street children, and the overcrowded, the whole of the system, the shelter homes, the observation homes. So there is need to work here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Brajesh. Very concrete requirements. Chitra has posted in the group as well about children with disabilities in Pondicherry and Tamil Nadu. Namita, you might want to have a look at that. And Sunita has put her hand up. So Sunita, yes, please do come in.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to add 2-3 very specific points. One is what we said, if we can make pressure group, in the sense, don't want to pressurize, but if we can facilitate the ministry, because given the core competence and capacities of different organizations, first of all, if we can map out that and share with the ministry saying that these are the organizations with co-competence who can be partner to the ministry to work with children. Second, parliamentary questions we've been asking. I think we need to ask more questions and get more answers from the government. And of course, IT-enabled real-time data, if we can ask for, and if in the organizations itself we have IT based, so we can look for more real-time data related to children. Because when I look at FIR, also, it doesn't give much details. When the case are registered, FIR just gives name or the perpetrator and the context. But more details are required if we want to prevent child abuse as to the situation, context, whether the person is known to the child, age of the child, and that data when we analyze, we'll be in a position to do some kind of prevention for any kind of abuse. So these are 3 quick points which I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Sunita. Yeah, Chitra, you had some point.
Yeah, and just to add, Karen, that on Annie's response, there was Mr. Vivek who said he can help out in terms of the IT solutions for their platform. So I think you've got some action happening.
Excellent.
Yes,
people have been asking to connect, so I think action is already happening. They're already deciding to catch up and talk after this. So that's the first point of collaboration, right? Talking and dialogue. So great. Yeah. Go ahead, Chitra. Sure.
So we are a special school working in Pondicherry in Tamil Nadu. We've been working in the area for about 18 years. But then the area that we've been struggling with is to identify, create a basic database as to how many children and what are the causes of, what causes disabilities. We also work in early intervention, early childhood program, and we have community-based rehabilitation, whereas reach is extensive through our mobile therapy units. But then only, and also we have a tie-up with JIPMER, which is one of the largest hospitals in the south. But then the only area we struggle is the data collection and the survey that we want. The survey is not, it's not efficient enough. We have the data, but then we want it to be very effective as to what are the causes and what are the disabilities, what are the different disabilities, and what are how many children can come under the different disabilities. So we want a very concrete data to even present and help us to formulate further policies and strategies.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Vinay, do you want to just quickly maybe tell people how you can help Annie and maybe others too? Because I'm pretty sure there'll be many others who will pick you up on that. So why don't you come in for a few seconds and talk about a little of those collaboration opportunities?
Sure. So the collaboration opportunity. So one of the things I was very keen about is from a data perspective, right? Like in the past, we've had other things like data.gov.in and things like that has been there to create open data. When it comes to children's data, right? There are some things that I think Melissa had also pointed out that there are problems with data security where things can actually get leaked and things like that. And I've seen other cases where we've had this case where you don't really store all the data. The people who are for example, Save the Children has its own data, it stores it elsewhere. And the security and everything lies there. We just there's another organization which is in the water domain, not really related to children's rights, where they do this aggregation and they say, you go get it from here. You just I'm just telling you that it's there. So for people who are doing research, they can actually just give pointers to where things are rather than storing everything. So there are certain privacy aspects and things like that, which can potentially be either very good or very bad when it comes to implementation. So those are some things that I was really interested in. That's why I said I'd be interested in taking part on whatever solution we end up doing.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Vinay. So we also have Ranjana. Ranjana, do you want to come in with your thoughts very quickly over here to collaborate?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity. I'm from Udyan Care, and Udyan Care works a lot with care levers issues, and we are looking forward for the organizations which are working on care lever issues, because there are a lot to do on their issue, as far as giving them a voice, their roadmap, and the challenges that they are facing regarding their inclusiveness or acceptance to the society. So the organizations which are working at the national level would be a great to join with them. Thank you. Over to you, Karan.
Well, Ranjana, I'm going to take that up myself. Please connect with me later, and I'd be happy to connect you with some people who are working in this space quite extensively and doing a lot of awesome work. Yeah, so very happy to do that. And maybe I will throw in my bit of collaboration over here. We are constantly looking to collaborate, as you can well see at the Rise World Summit. And we do a lot of work across the communication and advocacy piece. We have three big verticals. One is the communication and advocacy piece. The second is about stakeholder engagement. So while Sudarshan spoke about replicating, we're very happy. This started as a demonstration of what stakeholder engagement really should be like. And therefore, we are happy for people to replicate it, but we are also more than happy to partner with you to organize your own events, which will, of course, be about stakeholder engagement. We are not an event management company, but we definitely do everything. I mean, logistics end to end, and do that with you. And the third piece is monitoring and evaluation. So if there is an opportunity to work together in that space as well, we'd be more than happy to come in and do that with you. We are constantly looking, so do let us know. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Karen, maybe Professor Minai or Ashrita or Vivek, do you want to kind of come in terms of any concrete ideas for collaboration, especially from building on some of the recommendations you've shared, some of the solutions?
Can I? I just wanted to flag that. I am working with the university, and we also have a Center for Early Childhood Development and Research, which is a multidisciplinary center. We do a lot of research. So what we have found in the last segment of this is that there are people who would like to create evidence or would like their work to be converted into knowledge for other people. And there are people like us who are willing to do that. But the gap is that has to be kind of filled in. Like somebody has to invest heavily into this whole exercise where small efforts get documented and converted into knowledge. So I think we need to place evidence generation and research as a frontline activity. So there is need for more investment. And I just give you a small example. Like we keep on bidding for research, and very often when it comes to the kind of bidding discussion and other things, then it boils down to money, and then it boils down to your methodology, and then it boils down to the coverage that you can do with that amount of money. And so you land up with a lot of non-usable research which you have done for the sake of your portfolio, but is of no use because you have not been able to go in depth because there was less investment available, there was less money available. So I think we need to look at this space also. It's good to talk about the fact that we need evidence, but how do we actually get the system going so that we create good, robust evidence? That is what I wanted to point out. Thank you.
Great. Namrata, we are actually coming to our end. We do have a couple of other suggestions in the chat box.
Yes, absolutely.
If you want to take them up, this is now your prerogative, yeah? Because finally, it's also about the timing.
Absolutely.
You need to go ahead. Also, if you would like to kind of, sum up the whole session, I think would be really nice for everybody. And then don't go away because we do want to do a group photograph, and we just have one little bit of housekeeping that we need to close with. But please have some patience and stay in for the next 5-10 minutes. And that's it. Over to you, Namrata.
Yeah, thank you. I know, there's been a whole lot of recommendations and ideas in the chat also in terms of, there's a journal on childhood matters. So that's somewhere where people can also start contributing. So I would just say it's been a rich 2 hours discussion. And as the concrete next steps, because, we've kind of really looked at the whole emphasis on evidence, the evidence gaps, and some critical recommendations, and also collaborative actions and some decisions on collaboration. So I think the next steps would be we would be documenting this in the form of a report. So that will be one critical piece. So it doesn't it doesn't end up just being an event, a round table, a feel good factor. We've been able to vent out, but it can be very critical. So we will definitely have a report which will be prepared. We will also facilitate and see how we can engage. And Karen, we would definitely look forward to you also in terms of how we can use this community, because I was seeing this, and that's why we were very keen that how can we use this is like a community of practitioners, who are interested in evidence. So can we take this conversation forward? Because today has just been the initial bit, and there has been some very good recommendations where we are talking about, network of institutions. We are talking about building a, knowledge architecture. Professor Minai really spoke very well, in terms of do we really need to see how we can, as a collective of people and practitioners, and also ensure that can we look at some, joint fundraising opportunities for something like a platform which Annie spoke about. So is there something on child rights? So maybe today is just ensuring that we've kind of figured out that this is an area of need. There is a gap, and we need to take it forward. So without committing anything forward here, I would really look at you, Karen, and we would want to take this forward and see how at least ensure that we have a space where we can come together again and have a conversation and look at some of these elements, which it's not an easy effort, and like people said, it's not that things are not happening, but we just need to be able to bring it together. And from our side, as a collective, if we can make some kind of a change, whether it is collaborative, having a collaborative platform to just converse and share good practices, whether it is really coming together for, ensuring that we can also take it forward in terms of influencing the government and, resource mobilizers and, people who've got the investment potential to be able to, invest more in some of these components. So I would sum it up there, Karen, but I just want to kind of thank on behalf of all of us and say, thank you for providing us this beautiful opportunity. And we think the journey has just begun and we would want to take it forward. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to the whole group who've been here. It's been an extremely enriching discussion. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. This is what we say, that people, when they come to RISE and they attend a particular session, it's because they actually want to do it and not just because they're checking something out, So I think that's proof. This roundtable has been proof of that. And I'm really, really, really satisfied and happy about it.
Great.
And of course, looking forward, as you said, it's just the beginning. So I think I just want to close with the last kind of statements that we need to make is that, the RISE World Summit is really about the SDGs. And the way most people look at the SDG and the way it is, of course, presented is these 17 blocks, and therefore we all tend to work in 17 silos, right? Whereas really what we want to send the message out is that the SDGs are really this woolen ball of 17 colors of threads, which are so tightly intertwined, interlinked, integrated, whichever word you want to use for it, but that's how we need to look at it when we start looking at designing our programs, planning our programs, implementing our programs, because only then are we really going to leave no one behind and ensure that we have this holistic approach and look at the various aspects of our problems before we turn up with the solutions. And so that's the message we want to go with.